July 11th, 1990, what became known as the Oka crisis began. Many of you will remember that summer of crisis in Quebec because of a land dispute between the Mohawk people and the town of Oka. The dispute involved the planned expansion of a golf course on land that included an Indigenous burial ground. The blockade of a small dirt road access point had been erected months earlier, with court injunctions to remove it ignored. On July 11th, police moved in to forcibly remove the people and the blockade, and the crisis exploded. It also expanded, drawing thousands of people from around North America to join the protest. Several important commuter routes around Montreal were blocked, and there were multiple violent incidents that left 2 people dead and dozens, maybe even hundreds, injured, many seriously. After 78 days of fighting and 26 days of siege, when no supplies were let through, the remaining protesters ended their struggle and were arrested. The planned expansion to the golf course and new luxury homes to be built were, however, never built. The Government of Canada bought the land from the developers, and it has remained undeveloped. Ownership has never been transferred to the Kahnawake Nation, nor has it been established as a land reserve. The Oka crisis was the first well-publicized violent conflict between First Nations and provincial governments in recent memory. It brought Indigenous issues, including land disputes, to the forefront in Canada and encouraged changes to policing in and with Indigenous communities. I remember that summer, and while I don't remember if I thought about it at the time, I have certainly since noticed how the cries of peace that rise up in times of protest, violent or otherwise. A phrase comes to mind that I learned from Bishop Jim Cruikshank, God rest his soul. Bishop Jim was the last bishop from the former Diocese of Cariboo, centered in Kamloops. It is now known as the Territory of the People, since various structural iterations were necessary after the diocese shut down on December 31st, 2001, and Bishop Jim lost his job. The diocese shut down because of the financial strain caused by the legal costs associated with damage suits and third-party claims, mostly from the government, in relationship to the residential school run by the Anglican Church in Lytton. Though he hadn't been bishop when the abuses happened, because of his position, Bishop Jim was named in lawsuits and spent many hours in court and otherwise listening to the stories of residential school survivors. A deeply faithful man, Bishop Jim was always steadfast in his conviction that the church had done wrong and that we were responsible to make amends. I was involved with the National Church work at the time, and I remember hearing him talk about how if giving up our institutional resources, like our buildings or the very institution itself, was necessary to make things right, then so be it. We had done wrong. Indigenous children paid the price. And so he never wavered, at least not publicly, in his contention that we needed to do whatever we needed to do. It all happened before our church and other national churches signed a deal with the federal government to limit our liability and take away the possibility of bankruptcy. Bishop Jim was a key church leader who led the way. There is no peace without justice, Bishop Jim repeated in the years that I knew him. And the only way to justice is through sacrificial love, he always concluded. That's the gospel I learned from him. Peace with justice through sacrificial love. More than a catchy phrase or a lovely platitude, it names the difficult, often hard-fought and painful reality of what desiring peace, seeking peace, loving peace, working for peace, what it really means. There is no peace without justice, and we can only have justice through sacrificial love. The question is, whose sacrifice? The spiritual answer is, of course, Jesus. Jesus shows us the way every year as we worship our way through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection. It is our living of that answer in our time and place that is what it means to be called disciples of Christ, to be Christ's body in the world, our world, here and now. Jesus' sacrifice of love is what inspired Bishop Jim's clear and unequivocal answer. It was time for the church to sacrifice. Indigenous people, children, had been sacrificed more than enough. It was our turn, and it still is. The Mohawk warriors who stood their ground at Oka all those years ago did so because they believed it was time for the settlers and the developers to sacrifice instead of them and their sacred burial ground. It was someone else's turn, and it still is. Issues of justice for Indigenous people here in Canada, here in BC, right here on our island, continue. Most recent is the controversy related to the so-called Cowichan decision and questions of land claims and private property. I'm not going to pretend that it is in any way simple. Talking recently to a lawyer who's been involved in treaty negotiations, or was back in the day, just how complicated it is. And most likely, there is no answer that is going to be fair. And that's because while symbolic gestures of reconciliation are good, they're not enough. I've heard reflections recently from people wondering if we have unintentionally kind of thought that reconciliation meant helping white settlers feel better about the past. Our guilt assuaged, we think the issue is resolved. But what if it's more than that? What if it means real change, loving sacrifice for the sake of justice on the road to peace? I do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth, Jesus says today. The whole gospel passage is hard. It's hard to hear, it's hard to read, because we desire peace, a deep, lasting peace that we believe Jesus came to bring. Indeed, that Jesus has already brought. We believe in a God of peace. And the challenge is what that peace asks of us, the take up the cross and follow me part. And Jesus' conclusion, those who find their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For the path to peace goes through loving sacrifice. On this National Indigenous Day of Prayer, Archdeacon Rosalind Catalan-Elm, Director of Indigenous Ministry for the Anglican Church of Canada, has shared a beautiful and gentle sermon for the Diocese of Kootenay originally, but it is online. And you can find it under events on our diocesan website, among other places. It's easy to find. And I commend it to you. It's brief, it's only about 12 minutes, and it is worth your 12 minutes. In it, Archdeacon Elm speaks about sharing and gratitude and peace and reconciliation, saying in part, when communities are shaped by gratitude, peace becomes possible. Peace is not simply an inner feeling. Peace emerges when people stop competing for scarcity and begin living from abundance. Peace grows when people trust one another and become vulnerable with one another, when we can care for one another enough to just share without thinking. Peace comes when communities recognize that we are bound together by relationship and of care. Sacrificial love, that is the key to everything. For when we practice sacrificial love, justice flourishes and peace abounds.